Something is broken inside you, and you haven't even noticed. It wasn't a blow, nor an obvious betrayal. It was more subtle, slower, more cowardly. It was a silent death.
And the worst part is that you yourself applauded it. You stopped asking questions. You stopped thinking. You traded depth for the comfort of the superficial. You emptied yourself, and you called that maturing. Don't you notice? Something inside you has stopped fighting. You no longer seek meaning. You seek stimulation. You no longer ask who you are, but how many are watching you. You have become a pixelated reflection, sustained by algorithms that know you better than you know yourself. You are not the one choosing what you see. It is what you see that chooses you. And here comes the darkest part. You love it, because living anesthetized hurts less than facing the void head-on. Because when nihilism disguises itself as entertainment, decadence becomes sweet. You have replaced wisdom with content, contemplation with consumption. Want proof? Think about how many books you read this year. Now think about how many times you unlocked your phone today. Exactly. The void is not an accident, it's a design. Every notification is another brick in the wall that separates you from yourself. Every like is a caress that keeps you asleep while your soul bleeds out. And the worst part? You confuse that with freedom. But it isn't. It's high-definition slavery. Do you know what Schopenhauer said? That life is blind will, a brutal impulse that drags us along without meaning. And in this world, that will no longer seeks truth, nor beauty, nor transcendence. It only seeks dopamine. And the algorithms, those invisible gods that now govern our decisions, know it. They don't want you to think. They want you to react. They want you to compete, to shout, to hate. Because the more noise you make, the less you listen. And silence. Silence is dangerous to them. Because in silence, you could remember who you were before all this. You could remember that your mind was capable of contemplating death without trembling, of loving uncertainty, of living without needing approval. But that no longer happens. Because there is no contemplation, only dopamine, haven't you realized? Wisdom has been replaced by opinion. No one seeks to understand anymore. They only seek to be right. No one studies, they react. No one reflects, they respond. Knowledge has been reduced to brief, viral, mimetic phrases. And you know it. Deep down, you know it. Every time you pretend to know about a topic after watching a 30-second video, you are betraying that part of yourself that once wanted to understand the world. You are killing your own intelligence, and that death is slow but irreversible. Nietzsche spoke of passive nihilism as that state where the human, having lost their values, replaces them with nothing. They sit in the darkness and decide to stay there. They no longer fight against meaninglessness. They just adapt. They become comfortable in decadence. They become functional in ignorance. And that is exactly what is happening today. We live in a culture where noise has replaced thought, where mediocrity is rewarded with applause, where the loudest voice wins the most. And if you don't join that current, they call you arrogant, intellectual, old-fashioned, crazy. But here comes the most terrifying part. That world was made for you to give up, for you to stop thinking, reading, contemplating, for you to feel guilty for feeling different, for you to apologize for your lucidity, for you to hide your depth beneath a mask of sarcasm, memes, and cliches. They want you to be ashamed of your mind, and they are succeeding. Because critical thinking is no longer a virtue. It is a threat. Do you know why? Because a free spirit cannot be manipulated. And that is the problem. The current system, not political, not economic, but psychological, is sustained by collective passivity, by ignorant comfort, by blind acceptance. We live in an era where everything is questioned, except widespread stupidity, where everything is open to opinion, except what the algorithms decide to show you. And if you disagree, if you think differently, they silence you with labels. Extremist, harmful, dangerous. Do you understand now? Thinking has become subversive. Reflecting is a form of resistance. Silence has become a revolutionary act. And you have been silent for too long out of fear. But not the noble silence born from contemplation. Number. The silence of self-censorship. The one that lodges in your throat every time you have an uncomfortable idea. The one that stops you before questioning what everyone else repeats. That silence is cowardice. And it's not your fault. You were educated to please, not to doubt. To obey, not to question. To repeat, not to think. From childhood, you were taught to memorize answers, not to formulate questions. You were trained to perform, not to exist. But now you know, and that obliges you. Because if you've come this far, it's because something inside you still burns. A spark, a distant echo of that true will. Not the blind will Schopenhauer mentioned, no. That is what turns you into a cog. I speak of another will, that of the free spirit, of the one who refuses to be absorbed, of the one who observes chaos and does not surrender. That will that is born when you stop running from yourself, when you choose silence not to hide, but to listen to yourself. And that choice, now more than ever, is radical. Because resisting superficiality is not just an aesthetic decision. It is an act of mental survival. You don't need to escape the world. You need to escape the version of yourself that the world has built. That social mask that feeds on likes, approval, easy answers. That identity shaped by screens and others' opinions. That domesticated version that adapts to everything but belongs to nothing. Kill it. Don't save it. Don't redeem it. Kill it. And in its place, build something new. Not from noise, but from pause. Not from ego, but from wonder. Because while most seek attention, you can seek meaning. While others shout to forget the void, you can sit with it and listen to it. It's not easy, because depth does not give immediate rewards. It gives no medals, no applause, no virality. It gives only one thing: truth. And truth, when discovered, burns. But that fire is the only one that can wake you from lethargy. So choose. You can keep being just another product of this system, or become its greatest anomaly. You can keep shouting like everyone else, or you can keep silent and think. You can keep repeating what others say, or start asking what no one dares to ask. Do you dare to contemplate without filters? To seek without needing to find? To exist without needing to prove? Because if you can do that, if you can resist the seduction of the easy, the immediate, the viral, then you are already on the other side. You are a threat. And that, these days, is the greatest compliment someone can receive. The threat isn't you. It's your lucidity, your ability to stop when everyone else runs, your habit of asking questions when others celebrate cheap answers. But now I want you to look deeper, because there is something even more disturbing than superficiality, and that is the illusion of knowledge. That false sensation of knowing, fed by flashy titles, by out-of-context self-help phrases, by one-minute videos compressing centuries of thought into empty slogans. You were educated to believe that knowing is accumulating data, that reading phrases is understanding, that memorizing quotes is thinking. But that's not wisdom. That's entertainment disguised as depth. A comfortable lie, a mental placebo, and you consume it daily without realizing it, because it's easier to feel wise than to dare to be ignorant. Do you know what is the true basis of all deep thought? Humility, the ability to say, I don't know. But that is scary, because it confronts you with your own fragility, with your void, and the void hurts. So you fill it, not with truth, but with noise, with others' opinions that you repeat as if they were yours, with borrowed speeches you haven't digested, with certainties you never questioned. And little by little, without noticing, you stop thinking for yourself. That is the new illiteracy, not the inability to read, but the inability to interpret. Not the lack of access to knowledge, but the confusion of knowledge with spectacle. And here is where the trap becomes even more perverse. Because in this ecosystem of disguised ignorance, those who appear to know the most have the most influence. The silent wise man is no longer listened to, but the loud, charismatic one is. Coherence no longer matters. Impact does. Truth is no longer sought. Virality is. And that change has destroyed the moral compass of millions. Because now, thought is merchandise. Philosophy is content. Depth is an accessory. And you, without realizing it, have been pushed into that Vanity Fair. You have become a consumer of ideas without digestion, a spectator of debates without substance, a repeater of phrases without context. Do you know how dangerous that is? It gives you the illusion of being awake, while you sleep standing up. And meanwhile, the essential dies. Because philosophy, that which is born from anguish, from wonder, from the pain of existing, has been domesticated. It has become background decoration for digital profiles. An excuse to look interesting without having to cross the desert of real thought. But philosophy was not made for that. It was made to hurt you, to disarm you, to leave you naked before the inexplicable, to really think is dangerous, because it changes you, because it destroys your ego, because it forces you to give up your masks. And that is the only possible way out. No more masks, no more depth simulations, no more intellectual posturing. If you are going to think, do it with your guts, with your soul, with your flesh, not from comfort, but from trembling. And that trembling begins with a simple question. When did you stop questioning the world? Because if you are honest with yourself, you'll know there was a moment, a specific instant. You may not remember it, but it happened. One day you looked around, saw everyone silent, and decided to be silent too. You saw everyone pretending and decided not to upset anyone. You told yourself it was maturity. But it wasn't. It was fear. The fear of thinking differently. And here comes the cruelest part. You didn't cultivate that fear alone. It was cultivated in you by the system, by education, by the media, by a culture that doesn't want you to think, because if you think, you step out of the mold. If you step out of the mold, you are no longer useful. You no longer consume the same. You no longer obey the same. You no longer produce the same. So, what did they do? They taught you to distrust silence, to fear the void, to fill every second with noise, to reject discomfort as if it were a disease. They trained you to react to everything except yourself. And they succeeded, because now, every time you are alone, you feel anxiety. Every time there's no music, podcast, video, or message, you go into crisis. You don't know how to be with yourself. And that is the greatest existential failure of the modern individual. The fact of not being able to bear oneself without external stimuli. But the wise thing is not to flee that silence. It's to immerse yourself in it. Because only there does true thought begin. Only in that internal abyss can you hear something different from the echo of the world. And that is what scares them the most. That one day, amid the noise, someone decides to turn everything off, to sit down, to think, and to remember that they are not made to live anesthetized, that they are not here to repeat, but to create, that they are not here to react, but to contemplate. That memory is dangerous, because it awakens, and an awakened human being is ungovernable. But beware, because there is another silent enemy: speed. Everything has accelerated. There is no longer time for nuance, analysis, or contrast. What is not understood in 10 seconds is discarded. And in that haste, thought dies. Because depth needs slowness. It needs pause. It needs space. But they taught you that stopping is failing, that those who doubt are weak, that those who don't respond quickly fall behind. And you obeyed. You ran. You accelerated. You responded without thinking. You opined without knowing. You defended without understanding. And now you're exhausted. Because that pace is not human. It's mechanical. It's absurd. And you know it. You feel it in your bones. Every night you can't sleep. Every morning you can't find meaning. Every conversation where you pretend interest. And yet, you keep going. As if living like this were normal. As if this were the only way. But it's not. There is another. And it begins with a renunciation. The renunciation of noise, of haste, of the vanity of superficial knowledge, of the urgency to appear, of the anxiety to belong. And it begins with a brutal decision: being willing to lose all the unnecessary. Lose followers, lose popularity, lose comfort, lose certainties. Only then do you recover something infinitely more valuable: your thought, your voice, your gaze. Because whoever dares to think in a world that only repeats is already breaking the chains. And that, in times of intellectual slavery, is the greatest form of freedom. So tell me, are you going to keep pretending this doesn't hurt? Or are you going to do what very few dare to do? Stop, breathe, and start thinking for real. But thinking, my friend, is not a comfortable act. Thinking hurts, because it forces you to see yourself without adornments, without labels, without the comfort of belonging. It strips you from groups, from sides, from digital tribes that protected you from yourself. Thinking deeply means losing allies, losing certainties, losing flags. And that's why almost no one does it. Because thinking is, essentially, being alone. And in a society obsessed with visibility, loneliness is seen as failure. But what if I told you that it is precisely there, in that voluntary exile, where true power begins? What if I told you that isolation is not punishment, but a crucible? Look around you. Observe how everyone crowds into stimulus-saturated spaces. Multitudes thirsty for immediate approval. Comments, likes, retweets. People who don't stop to breathe because they fear hearing their own thoughts. Because when the noise turns off, what appears is what they fear most: their void. And then you realize something that shakes you. That much of humanity no longer acts from desire, but from fear. Fear of being left out. Fear of not being heard. Fear of not being. The modern individual no longer desires by will. They desire by reflex. They want what others want. They hate what others hate. And if they deviate even a little, they start to tremble. Do you know why? Because they have no internal compass. Because their entire value system has been externalized. It no longer comes from contemplation, silence, inner conflict. It comes from comparison. And comparison is the most subtle form of slavery. When you compare, you stop looking inward. When you compare, you become a copy, an echo, a shadow. And here comes the big question no one dares to ask. To what extent are your thoughts really yours? Because if you were educated by a system that rewards obedience and punishes doubt, if you grew up watching the brave being ridiculed for raising their hand, if you spent your adolescence adapting your authenticity to a screen, how do you know your identity is not just a set of learned reactions? Most don't know. Most don't want to know. Because admitting it means having to rebuild yourself from scratch. It means having to cross the desert of not knowing who you are. And that journey is arid, unpredictable, wild. But it's also the only one that leads to freedom. Because when you strip away the borrowed, the true appears. And the truth is not pretty. It is not marketable. It doesn't fit any algorithm. It has no filters. It doesn't shine at first glance. But the truth is the only thing that can sustain you when everything else collapses. And that, in this era, is the closest thing to armor. An invisible armor forged every time you choose to think instead of repeat. Every time you choose to feel instead of react. Every time you choose to be silent when the whole world shouts. Have you noticed that? How opinion has become an obligation. How it's expected that you have something to say about absolutely everything. Even if you understand nothing. Even if you haven't read a single line. Even if you haven't lived a single related experience. And if you stay silent, they attack you. Because silence is no longer a right. It's suspicious. But there is a type of silence the system cannot control. An active silence, chosen. A silence that listens more than it speaks. A silence that doesn't seek attention, but depth. That is the silence that transforms. The one Nietzsche valued when he spoke of the free spirit. Not the one who opines on everything, but the one who thinks for themselves. The one who has the courage to be silent to observe. The one who knows that self-judgment only comes from internal conflict, not external echo. And that kind of spirit is dangerous, because it doesn't get dragged by trends, because it doesn't need to belong to any side, because it can look at decadence calmly and not get lost in it. That spirit, when it awakens, becomes an anomaly, a crack in the machinery of superficiality. And cracks, no matter how small, always announce a rupture. So here you are, in the middle of chaos, in a society that glorifies immediacy, speed, form over substance. And you decide to stop, to breathe, to think, to resist. It's a tiny, almost imperceptible act, but it's also an act of war, because resisting is not just saying no, it's learning to wait, to hold internal conflict without anesthesia, to live with open questions, to not flee the void. And then you understand that the void is not the enemy. The enemy is the inability to be in it. Because the void, when inhabited, transforms. It becomes fertile space, the cradle of ideas, the origin of all creative thought. But if you avoid it, if you fill it with noise, distractions, others' opinions, then yes, it devours you. Then yes, it enslaves you. And that is what has happened to our culture. We have avoided the void so much that we have stopped creating. There is no longer time for beauty, for true art, for contemplation. Now everything must be useful, profitable, shareable. Art is no longer the mirror of the soul. It is a product for consumption. Thought is no longer a compass. It is content. And you accept it because it's comfortable, because it's easy, because thinking hurts. But you also know something is lost, something essential, primitive, human, is disintegrating before your eyes. And that keeps you awake, because you know you weren't born to pretend, nor to repeat, nor to fit in. You were born to look, to listen, to ask what no one wants to ask. You were born to inhabit doubt, not to run toward the nearest certainty. You were born to break patterns, not to follow pre-designed paths. And if you have come this far, if you are still listening, it's because that inner voice still whispers, even if weakly, even if barely audible above the noise. That voice that doesn't want likes, nor fame, nor belonging. It only wants one thing: truth. And that search in this era is the greatest act of rebellion. So keep going, even if you are alone, even if they don't understand you, even if they call you crazy, because history doesn't remember the obedient. It remembers those who dared to think differently when everyone else was asleep. And you are already waking up. But now comes the hardest part, because waking up isn't enough. The world doesn't change just because you have opened your eyes. Opening your eyes is only the beginning. Now you have to learn to see, and seeing, truly, is unbearable. Because when you start to see what you previously ignored, what you once called normal begins to seem grotesque. Conversations bore you. The news disgusts you. Culture seems like a joke. Daily life becomes a badly written play where everyone repeats someone else's lines with a frozen smile. And you are there, awake, observing, and that lucidity at times burns. But it is the price of freedom, because now you can't go back. You can't pretend again. You can't act as if nothing happened. You have crossed the threshold, and you know it, and now you have to decide. Are you going to hide your clarity so you don't upset anyone? Are you going to repress your thought to keep belonging? Are you going to pretend not to see what you see? Or are you going to walk like a specter among shadows? Look, I'm going to tell you something very few dare to confess. Being conscious in a sleeping world is a curse. And now that we've made it this far, before we continue, I want to present the following to you. Our book, The Formula of Awakening, is now available. Do you feel like there's something inside you that wants to awaken, but you don't know where to start? Then I invite you to transform your way of thinking, and with it, your way of living. Discover who you can become. Start today. The link to get the ebook is in the first pinned comment of this video. Grab your copy now at a great price. With that said, let's continue with the video. But it is also the greatest privilege, because only those who see the bottom of the abyss can build something different. And you now have that possibility. But it's not about shouting it, nor preaching it, nor convincing anyone. Deep thought doesn't need a microphone. It manifests in gesture, in pause, in the gaze. True change doesn't begin with speeches. It begins with presence, with coherence, with that silence full of truth that unsettles more than 1,000 words. So don't get distracted. Don't try to save the world. Save yourself first. Rebuild your mind. Knead your ideas. Polish them with solitude. Contrast them with pain. Throw them into the fire of doubt and let the weak ones melt away. Keep the ones that survive. And when you have something so true that it hurts your chest, then share it. But not before. Because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs truth. And truth doesn't shout. It burns silently. So if all this resonated with you, if you felt something inside you tremble while I spoke, it's because you are not as far as you thought. Maybe you had already awakened, but you needed someone to put words to your chaos. Maybe you've been feeling for years that something didn't fit, but you didn't know how to name it. Now you can. You don't need permission to think, nor approval to exist, nor an audience to have value. Your freedom doesn't depend on the algorithm, nor on validation. Your freedom begins the day you decide to be yourself, even if no one understands. And if you've stayed until the end, it's because you are not like the rest. You feel what others keep silent. You think what others fear. You doubt where others repeat. And that, these days, makes you indestructible. So leave a trace. In the comments, write a phrase. I think, therefore I disobey. Let the world know you are here, that not everyone is asleep, that there are still free voices among so much hollow echo. And if this video made you think even a little, subscribe. Because this isn't a channel to entertain you. It's a channel to wake you up, to shake you, to make you uncomfortable. You don't come here to find answers. You come to ask better questions. And that is infinitely more valuable. See you at the next abyss. Or maybe not. Maybe. We'll just cross paths in the silence. There, where there are still souls who dare to think when everyone else is only pretending to be alive. Goodbye. Or better yet, wake up.